What if the footsteps you hear in your own home aren't just the creaks of an old house? What if those shadows hiding in the dark are not ghosts, but something far worse? Tonight, we dive into a chilling true story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. A story of secrets buried for nearly a century, a missing husband, and a restless spirit desperate for justice. They thought it was a ghost, but the truth? It will haunt you long after the video ends. Stay with us. It began with the footsteps. At first, Rachel thought she was imagining them. Soft, slow, deliberate steps that echoed faintly above her ceiling. The old farmhouse had always creaked a little, especially at night. But these were different. These weren't the random groans of aging wood. They were paced, rhythmic, almost human. She held her breath under the thick quilt, straining to hear. The wind outside howled like a dying animal, but the sound above her was steady, measured. One step, then another, then silence. She didn't wake her husband. Mark never believed in silly things, as he called them. He'd scoffed at the ghost stories the neighbors shared when they first moved into the rural Pennsylvania house. People always need something to blame when their mind plays tricks, he'd said with a laugh, back when they still laughed together. That was a year ago. Now Rachel barely recognized the man she married. Ever since the accident at his job, the one he never fully explained, he'd grown distant, withdrawn. He drank more, he slept less, and he barely touched her anymore, except for the rare nights when he muttered apologies in his sleep, clutching her as if trying to forget something. She tried not to think about that now. Instead, she focused on the silence above her, waiting. Nothing. Maybe it was the wind after all. Maybe it was the old pipes or a raccoon in the attic. She forced herself to close her eyes. But just as sleep was about to take her, the floorboard creaked again. This time it was closer. The next morning, Rachel climbed into the attic. She told herself it was to find the source of the sound, to prove it was nothing. But deep down, she was afraid of what she might find. The attic was cramped and cold, with a single dusty window that barely let in any light. Boxes lay piled in corners, untouched since they moved in. Old photographs, tools, a broken rocking chair, but nothing else. No sign of animals, no loose floorboards, nothing that could explain footsteps. Except one thing, the rocking chair. It was moving, only slightly but enough. It swayed slowly, gently, as if someone had just stood up from it. She stared at it, not daring to breathe. Then she snapped a picture with her phone, thinking maybe she could show Mark. Maybe it would be enough to make him listen. But when she looked at the screen, her stomach turned. There was a figure behind the chair. Faint, blurred, but there. She ran. That night she told Mark everything. He listened quietly, his face unreadable. When she showed him the picture, he didn't say a word. He just deleted it. "It's a glitch," he muttered. "Dust. Light. Your mind's playing tricks again." But it looked like someone was there. A woman. Mark stood. "Rachel, there's nothing in that attic but junk. You need to stop." He didn't sleep beside her that night. He sat in the living room until morning, lights off, bottle in hand, staring into nothing. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling. The footsteps returned, night after night, always at the same hour, always growing closer. Sometimes, she thought she heard breathing. Once, she was sure someone whispered her name. She started sleeping with the light on, locking the bedroom door, pushing furniture in front of it. One evening, when Mark had gone to town, she heard a thud above her. Not a footstep, more like something dropping. Hard, heavy. She ran to the attic again. This time something had changed. The rocking chair was gone. In its place was an old chest she didn't remember seeing before. It was sealed shut with rusted chains, the kind you'd need bolt cutters to remove. She knelt beside it, heart pounding. There was something carved into the wood, words, barely legible under decades of grime. I told them not to bury her here. She backed away slowly. The room felt colder now, like the walls themselves were breathing. She stumbled down the ladder, nearly tripping over her own feet, and slammed the hatch shut. That night, she made Mark promise they'd leave. He didn't respond, just poured another drink. The next morning, the chest was gone. So was Mark. When Rachel woke up that morning, the house felt emptier than ever. The familiar weight of Mark beside her was gone, vanished like the old chest in the attic. Panic surged through her chest as she called his name, but only silence answered back. She checked every room, the garage, even outside the barn. No sign of him. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't look for him. It's safer that way. Her hands trembled as she reread the message. Who would send something like this? Was it a joke? A warning? Or something darker? Rachel tried calling Mark again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She called the neighbors. None had seen him since yesterday. The sheriff's department was sympathetic but said without evidence of foul play or a crime. Their hands were tied. Days passed, and the strange occurrences escalated. Objects moved on their own. Doors slammed shut with no wind. Shadows flitted just beyond her vision. And every night, those same slow footsteps echoed above, closer and closer, as if the unseen presence was pacing, waiting for something or someone. One night, Rachel heard a voice. Not a whisper, not a murmur, but a clear, cold voice calling her name. It was coming from the attic. She stood frozen at the foot of the ladder, heart hammering, sweat cold on her skin. The voice called again, this time pleading. Help me. She forced herself up the ladder. The attic was darker than before, the single window boarded up with old planks. The air was thick, suffocating, and the temperature had dropped noticeably. As her eyes adjusted, she saw it. A faint glow emanating from the corner. There, beneath a pile of dusty boxes, lay an old journal. Its leather cover cracked, pages yellowed and brittle. Rachel opened it carefully, the handwriting inside jagged and hurried. It was a diary, a woman's diary. A woman who had lived in this house long ago. The entries told a story of love, betrayal, and tragedy. The writer, a woman named Eleanor, spoke of a secret pregnancy, a husband who turned violent, and a child taken away in the dead of night. She wrote of hiding in the attic, whispering prayers for rescue that never came. Her final entry was a desperate plea. They said they would protect me, but they buried me alive. Please find me. Set me free. Rachel's blood ran cold. Was this the ghost she had heard? Or something worse? Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. The footsteps started again. Faster now, frantic. She could feel a presence closing in. In a panic, Rachel kicked at the door until it gave way. She tumbled down the ladder, breathless, heart racing. She knew then that whatever was haunting this house wasn't just a restless spirit. It was something trapped, something angry. That night, she scoured the town records. Old newspapers, birth certificates, death notices. The name Eleanor appeared multiple times, but the story was fragmented. A young woman who vanished without a trace in 1923. Rumors of scandal and secrecy surrounded her disappearance. Some said she had been committed to an asylum. Others whispered about a cover-up. Rachel's mind spun. Could Mark's disappearance be connected? Had he uncovered something buried in the past? Something that someone wanted to keep hidden? She wasn't sure if she was being hunted by a ghost, or by people who still feared the truth. Rachel's nights became a battleground between fear and desperation. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow sent chills down her spine. She knew she was no longer alone in that house. Not truly. The presence wasn't just haunting the walls. It was pulling her into a dark history she could no longer ignore. One evening, fueled by a mix of terror and resolve, she decided to return to the attic again. This time, she wasn't just going to look. She needed answers. She grabbed a flashlight, a notebook, and a camera. If this house held secrets, she would expose them. As she climbed the ladder, the air thickened, almost suffocating. The scent of damp would mixed with something else. Something metallic, bitter. She swept the flashlight beam over the floor and the boxes, finally stopping at a faded tapestry hanging against the far wall. Pulling it aside, Rachel revealed a hidden door. It was small, just big enough for someone to squeeze through. Her heart pounded as she pushed it open. The space beyond was narrow and dark, like a crawl space leading deeper into the house's bowels. With shaking hands, she entered. The passage was cold, and the walls were slick with moisture. At the end, a faint light flickered. As she approached, the glow revealed an old, iron-bound trunk. It looked ancient, chained shut, similar to the chest she had seen before but bigger. Rachel fumbled with the lock, and it gave way more easily than expected. Inside were dozens of letters, tied in bundles with faded ribbons. She pulled one out and unfolded it carefully. The letters were from Eleanor, addressed to a man named Thomas, a man Rachel hadn't heard of before. The words spoke of fear, love, and a terrible secret. Eleanor had discovered Thomas was involved in something sinister, something that led to her imprisonment in that attic and her eventual disappearance. The last letter was a desperate cry for help, dated just days before she vanished. Rachel's hands trembled as she read. "They fear what I know. They will do anything to keep it hidden. If anything happens to me, you must tell the world." The implication was clear. Eleanor was silenced, locked away, forgotten. Suddenly, a cold breath brushed Rachel's neck. She spun around, heart in her throat. No one. But the footsteps started again, this time louder, faster, almost urgent. Rachel realized with a sinking feeling that she wasn't just dealing with a restless spirit. Something darker was alive, watching her, waiting for her next move. When she returned to the main floor, the house was cold and still. On the kitchen table lay a single object she hadn't noticed before, a tarnished silver locket. She picked it up, and inside was a faded photo of a young woman and a child. A chill ran through her. Eleanor's child. Rachel understood then that this house held more than memories. It held the key to a long-buried tragedy, and possibly the fate of her missing husband. Rachel's world was unraveling. The house, the letters, the ghostly footsteps. They all led to something she couldn't ignore anymore. She had to find Mark. But the more she dug, the more she realized the truth was tangled in a web of secrets older than the house itself. That night, she called the sheriff again, sharing what she'd found in the attic. The sheriff listened, frowning deeper with every word. Then he leaned in and said something Rachel wasn't prepared for. "There's more to this than you know," he whispered. "That house, it's been the center of rumors for decades. People say it's cursed, that families who live there don't last. But there's something worse, something hidden beneath it all." He showed her a faded map, an old blueprint of the property, with a strange symbol marked deep beneath the cellar. Rachel's heart sank. She had never thought to check below the house. With the sheriff's reluctant permission, Rachel found herself descending into the cellar, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with mildew and secrets. After searching for what felt like hours, She found a hidden trapdoor beneath a loose stone. Opening it, she was met with cold, stale air and the sound of dripping water. A narrow staircase led downward into a forgotten tunnel. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. At the tunnel's end was a small chamber. The walls were stained with old blood marks and faded writings. Prayers, curses, warnings. In the center, a rusted iron cage stood ominously empty. And then she saw it. A small bundle wrapped in torn cloth, tucked into a dark corner. Rachel's hands shook as she unwrapped it. A fragile skeleton of a child. Memories flooded back. Eleanor's letters, the photo in the locket, the whispered name from the attic. This was the secret they buried. The child Eleanor had hidden, and the truth no one dared to speak. Suddenly, the footsteps thundered above, and the cellar door slammed shut. Rachel was trapped. But she wasn't alone. A cold presence filled the room, and a voice, barely more than a breath, whispered her name. "Help me. Set us free." Rachel's terror melted into resolve. She knew what she had to do. She had to expose the darkness lurking in that house, uncover the full story buried in the past, and find Mark before it was too late. Rachel was trapped in that dark cellar, the weight of the past pressing down on her. But she wasn't going to give up. With trembling hands, she searched the room for anything she could use. Then she spotted a rusted old key hanging on a nail, almost invisible against the stained wall. Hope surged. She grabbed it and hurried to the door. The lock clicked open and the heavy wooden door creaked as she pushed it wide. Back upstairs, she felt the house shift around her as if the walls themselves were breathing a sigh. The oppressive presence lifted slightly, but Rachel knew the battle wasn't over. Armed with Eleanor's letters and the evidence from the cellar, Rachel contacted a local historian and journalist, people who could help her uncover the truth buried for nearly a century. They dug into archives, uncovered long-forgotten court records, and pieced together the story. Eleanor had been a victim of a brutal, wealthy family desperate to hide a scandal, the birth of an illegitimate child that threatened their name and power. The child, Eleanor's baby, had been hidden away and ultimately murdered to keep the secret buried. The house was built on that dark truth, a prison for Eleanor's restless spirit and the silence of a crime never brought to justice. As Rachel's investigation gained attention, strange things began happening less and less. It was as if revealing the truth started to break the chains binding the ghosts. But Mark? He remained missing. Then, one rainy afternoon, Rachel received a call from a remote hospital in a neighboring state. A man fitting Mark's description had been found wandering near an abandoned road, disoriented and unable to recall how he got there. He had injuries and signs of malnourishment but was alive. Rachel rushed to him. Mark's eyes, though haunted, finally found hers. Slowly, fragments of memory returned, a kidnapping, being held captive in a forgotten place beneath the house, and finally an escape during a storm that washed away the trail. Together, they returned to the farmhouse, now empty and quiet. The ghosts were free. Rachel and Mark left the house that day, but the scars remained on their minds, their hearts, and in the shadows of the past. They never spoke much about what happened, but sometimes, late at night, Rachel would swear she heard a soft voice in the wind whispering thanks. They thought it was a ghost, but the truth was far worse. The house stands silent now, but the echoes of the past still linger, whispers of truth, pain, and betrayal. Rachel and Mark's story reminds us that some secrets refuse to stay buried and some ghosts demand to be heard. If you found this story as haunting as we did, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't the ghosts, but the truth hiding in the shadows.